We call the September meeting of the General Government Committee to order. We do have a full agenda today, and as we get into our items today, I do ask for those who will be commenting and having presentations to understand that we do have a lengthy agenda, and so again, as it has been in committee meetings before, brevity will be in order for this meeting. As normal, we will take the consent agenda first, followed by the general agenda. Are there items on the consent agenda that members of the committee would like to have pulled? I have three. Mr. Clark?
C2, C5, C7, and C8.
Ms. Adams, do you have any? Well, I guess I have C1, C6, and C8. Mr. Bessie, any?
No, sir.
Okay.
For approval of the, all we got to do.
Just a second. Do we have anyone in the room today who are present for demolition items? I do see two names listed here before us. A Dan Joel, and that is for property 11 North Main. Is that correct? Is that?
No, sir. We're here for general business item G3.
Okay. Another one says Durham as well. Okay, I know which one you're here for. Anyone's here for residential demolition? What is that property, sir? Peachtree. C9.
C9.
Anyone else present for a demolition case that is present? Seeing none, before we go and we pass the consent agenda, you're here for C9. If 90 days is sufficient for you to get the repairs made on the property, you can bypass staying through this process and you can see staff. If you would like to have a full hearing on it, we can move forward with the item. If that's a yes or no, and if in hearing the hesitation, is there a motion to approve the balance and we'll have a full hearing on the case?
I move for approval of the balance of the consent.
Second.
All right. We'll move forward with, well, it's okay. We'll give you a chance. All in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, no. That is unanimous, and we will take up our consent agenda items, starting with item C1. Item C1.
Item C1, resolution naming the Lowry Street Municipal Services Center after Joycelyn V. Johnson, located in the East Ward.
This is an item that I actually pulled just to raise the level of it. This is an item that I requested and recommended. Mr. Damon Duquesne, would you like to give us just a response back? You had the pleasure to talk with Ms. Johnson and let her know that this request had been made.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. I will say this, Ms. Johnson shared with me that she was speechless when presented with this honor. In accordance with your recommendation, Mr. Chairman, we're attempting to recognize Ms. Johnson's contributions as a 4-term East Ward Council representative and her numerous accomplishments throughout the community. And I can summarize just a few briefly. She was the first in Winston-Salem to hold semi-annual East Ward Town Hall meetings to address citizen concerns. She was an advocate for scholastic excellence, achievement, and development of our Winston-Salem and Forsyth County youth. She was an advocate for promoting quality housing infrastructure and public safety. She was dedicated to the revitalization efforts throughout the city, especially the Liberty Street corridor, Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, Patterson Avenue, Lowry Street, the downtown, including Wake Forest Innovation Corridor, and the BB&T Ballpark.
Thank you again. We have taken time on this council and in this city to recognize whether it's been former elected officials or individuals who have served this community in many different capacities. And I thought it was in order to take this step to make this recommendation. And we'll look forward to the support of this committee and the council moving this item forward. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
That's been properly moved and second. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Those opposed, likewise. That is unanimous. Item C2.
Item C2, resolution allowing elected officials to record monthly programs on WSTV digital media.
Mr. Clark, Jack,
do. Ed, do you want to give just a brief comment on this?
Yes, sir. Committee member, or committee chair Montgomery, members of the committee, this item starts back in 2012 when what was approved by council was a television show for council members that was a 15-minute television program based on an interview style, and it was produced inside TV 13 studios. The program was monthly. We distributed it both on the city's television station, YouTube channel, as well as through the city's social media, and we monitored the comments and helped keep the public updated on what was going on within the ward of the council member whose show we were doing.
And now there's a request to allow any publicly elected official to come on?
That's correct. Any public official who is who represents a portion of Winston-Salem.
Can I comment?
Yes, sir.
I have a concern with this. My concern is as we continue to open it up, I think if we're going to be fair, we need to open it up to any candidates or potential candidates for these offices. And I think it's even prior to Mr. Bessie and I coming on. They used to have anyone and everyone on Channel 13, and it got to be beyond out of control. And I don't think the purpose of Channel 13 is to provide a political forum for various people, but simply to keep the citizens of Winston-Salem informed on their city. And therefore, I will not support this.
Right. Any other comments here? Go to the committee and then I'll come back around.
Just,
Mr. Bessie.
Mr. Clark, does the blackout period from filing for an election to the election not address the political usage concern?
Only if in the non-blackout period we also provided opportunity for anyone who potentially might be seeking election as well. I think it gives a huge advantage to certain folks, and I have concerns with that.
I know I'm one who even requested this, and I think it's a big step to put it out to candidates because that is not the forum for it. If you hold office, you represent people who would be a part of it, and so I think we start getting into candidates. It turns I don't even know, and I'm looking at the city attorney if we legally could even allow for candidates to utilize that because there would not necessarily be a direct purpose for their use. They're not representing, they're not reporting on government that impacts the people in that way.
I think there might be an argument if you open it up to that extent, it's being used for political purposes as opposed to informing citizens of what is occurring in local government, either at the city level or the state level. I think there's an argument it may be prohibited. I've not looked at it, but that would be my off-the-cuff type of response.
I think this is blatantly partisan, what we're suggesting, and I'll just leave it at that.
Could you go a little deeper, Mr. Clark?
Well, you're the one that's requesting it.
Yeah, I won't hide that at all. I'm the only one actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Clark, I'm the only one who actually really uses it to inform the community in that way.
And now that you're moving on to Raleigh, you want to continue to use the local city resources to further your political career. And I support you going to Raleigh, but I don't think the purpose of Channel 13 is for that reason.
And to offer clarity, every single episode, which I hope you watch them, and if you know, every one of them has to do with actual city government, whether it is having the city manager to discuss issues that are pertinent, parks and recreations. The city attorney office reviews every single episode to ensure that is not a partisan or political act. On that premise that it is actual political, you should have no community meetings. You shouldn't engage with people in public. You shouldn't use media. We shouldn't put out information on social media as a city government. So I think that is an extreme step to politicize something that is, to this date, in my opinion, has not been politicized, nor have I heard such concerns of politicization. And so we use some words in this way that is different. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I have to say I started with some concern on this, but to differentiate, if we have a blackout period, other than the blackout period, there are no candidates. I mean, you're a candidate when you register and you stand for election. So, there's really a question of open forum. I think my concern begins to revolve a little bit around reining in or understanding what the pool is. And so I understand city council members and the mayor and what have you. I understand to some degree county commissioners who, of course, aren't providing any money that I'm aware of to CAT TV or anything. and giving them a forum. I understand the transparency and the desire to have representatives speak. We including, of course, legislators or senators to the state. We're talking about national or federal positions. We got congressmen. We have senators. We have judges. We're allowing judges to speak on these things. Anybody whose name would appear soil and conservation, anybody who actually is voted upon and holds an elected office, I'm assuming, under this rule, would be eligible. I have no idea how many people that is. Do you?
We've started gathering that list, but yes, sir, you're right. If they represent an office that or if they're in an office that represents a portion of Winston-Salem,
If they're elected.
if they're voted
right.
for in Winston-Salem, they would be
Right.
eligible to be on.
So we have a variety of state legislators, state senators, all kinds of people. And I'm a little concerned that I understand the argument of disseminating information to the public who elect people. I'm not entirely sure that it's the city's responsibility to carry that load without some support from other agencies if we're providing that platform to do that. If we're opening it up to a vast amount of interviews, time consuming, so it's only going to take place during our regular hours. It's still going to take up staff time. It's going to take up staff broadcast time. And I'm a little concerned about doing that. I would suggest that we have a trial period of some sort to just see what the impact is. It may not be if legislator Montgomery chooses to be the only one still to use it, then it's not going to really have any impact. But if, in fact, we find that everybody's using it as a political forum, then I think maybe it's more than we can handle, in spite of our desire to be transparent and to provide access to the information to the public. I think maybe that's not entirely our full responsibility at this point for the city to provide that.
Mr. McIntosh?
I've got a couple different sort of conflicting opinions on it. One of the most difficult things for us, as we all know, is communicating with the public, getting information out, having people come back and say, well, I didn't know about that, when it's been out in the public realm for quite a while. So I understand that you use that as a tool very effectively. I use my newsletter at that. I think it's fairly effective. I do worry about it increasing the power of incumbency. The last time, and at the city level, in our last election, we had 2 contested races out of 8. At the state level, we've had multiple instances of not having any real competition at that level, and I think it bolsters the person in office's ability to run unelected or unopposed the next time. I think down the road, not looking at this particular situation, but I think it would give people who are not necessarily interested in the best interest of Winston-Salem to be on our airwaves more often and be able to, gain significant influence, even though they're not primarily in this market. There's one race right now I'm thinking at the U.S. House level that I think that could come back to haunt us. I think it just opens the door for abuse down the road.
Like a public comment period. Mr. Bessie will come and Mr. Clark.
Yeah, I think there are decent arguments pro and con on the merits of this. I'll speak frankly. I'm a candidate for office, and I know if I vote for this now, there will be some who will misportray it as a political move. I'd rather see this postponed until after the election, and it can be discussed not in the environment of an active campaign.
That's what I'm saying. And I think Mr. Larson makes logical concerns in reference to it. I think in terms of the concerns that are raised there around what we look at resources, as well as the questions of how we can measure long-term use and quote-unquote abuse of it in a measure. So even in the context of this comes back at some other time, I think those are items to think about in some type of proposal. What is a time review? What does that look like? And again, the fact that because it may be a place where individuals are unfamiliar because they don't utilize it, to the point that there is political things that are engaged there, again, the city attorney's office are reviewing, and to my understanding, for the purpose to ensure that what is aired is legally able to be aired on TV 13, to ensure that we do not violate any laws in reference to what is presented, and ensuring that politically is not political content that is being put on TV 13. That's a specific source, and even the individuals and the conversations that are there must be somehow attached back to local government and individuals. Mr. Clark?
Yeah. I do think Mr. Bessie had a valid comment that has to do with the blackout period. The challenge once you get out of the city, and not typically, if you're running for city council, we file in July. If there's a primary, it's in September, and the election's in November. If you're running for Raleigh or Washington, you file in January. February. Normally, the primary's in May, unless there's a lawsuit, and who knows when it happens. But and the election's in November. So I think if we, and I like Mr. Bessie's idea, maybe take this up after the election, but I certainly think the blackout period should match the campaign period, which means in even years you're going to have a blackout period starting in February through November, and that's 10 out of 13 months or something, whatever. But anyway.
And from my understanding, it does currently. If even for those individuals who are in office currently on the council who utilize it, if they declare for an office, the blackout period then pertains to them even at that time.
Okay. But I think it's worth revisiting that.
I was just going to say, thank you, Chair. I agree with Councilmember Bessie that we should table this. You got 3 of us running on this council presently, and it could be misconstrued as something that would benefit us more than others. So, again, I'd like to see us bring this up after this election period is over, maybe January or something like that, because you're going to get new people, and they need to be involved in that conversation, I think.
Yeah, and I think those concerns, the specific concerns, should be a part of anything that's brought back in some way on terms of what is a way, if particularly at the a review period of time, if it is something done as a pilot, that there's a standpoint that anyone who did participate in it, that there's no commitment after a certain time frame, that you can continue this, so that folks, you don't start something and folks say, well, I couldn't give it. Well, in the beginning, it was never promised to be long term, and after that point, if the council at that time decides to continue something, they can make that decision at that time.
And then at that point, with our new web and other interactive technology that's coming on board, we can get feedback whenever we launch, if there is a launch for a pilot, that you can get feedback from the citizens vis-a-vis the actual programming to respond online as well. Did you benefit from this? Do you like this? Less of this, more of that. Right. So we could work that out, I'm sure.
Okay. Without any objections, this will be held in committee until such time as we bring that back around, but probably after election cycle.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do want to pause. I did see Ms. Johnson come in the back, and so wanted to. And I would yield, Ms. Johnson. We've already approved item C1. I pulled it for discussion. We're in reference to honoring you. And if you would so like, we would yield you a time if there's no objection.
I would like to say thank you.
Give your name and address for the record.
Swear you in, whatever.
My name is Jocelyn V. Johnson. I reside at 2426 Edison Court here in Winston-Salem, 27101. People think I live other places, but I do. Live on Edison Court. Have an opportunity to have served on the council, and thank you for the naming of the Lowry plant. As we looked at Lowry Street, Lee and others years ago, and the fact that in one of the earlier plans, in one of the 1989 plans, it talked about that being an industrial area, and we strived to make that be what it was to be in the plan. So thank you for the opportunity. A lot of infrastructure brings on a lot of things. It brings the economic development pieces. It brings the community development together. And I do thank you, Councilmember Montgomery and others. And when I saw that it was on consent, I originally had the meeting at 4:30, and then John told me yesterday, well, it's moved up to 3:30. It's like, okay, I do have a real regular day job. So about 3:15, the alarm went off. It's like, oh, I got to get out of here real quickly. But I just knew that it was on consent. It was just going through with an approval of the whole consent agenda. But thank you for pulling it off and giving me the opportunity to say thanks. And to all of you.
Mr. Clark?
I will tell one quick story. Ms. Johnson is my wife's favorite council person, and that includes me.
Or none.
And she would always tell me, why don't you act more like Joycelyn? So, well deserved.
We'll now move to item C5.
Item C5, resolution authorizing the city to join the Bee City USA organization.
Yeah, just a quick question. By the way, I love bees. We need them. I was just concerned with the comments number D. It says develop and implement a program to create or expand pollinator-friendly habitants. Let me be sure that, yeah, that's the end of it. I just want to be sure there's not an unintended consequences. What do we need to do in order in this area as far as being bee-friendly?
Well, some of the things that we would need to do is educate on specific processes that would not help diminish the number of bee colonies within the urban area.
Okay.
So I don't see that it would be something that would be really earth-shattering, but it would be more on the education side.
Okay.
Letting individuals know how important the pollinators are to our food chain.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Mr. McIntosh?
I'm the one that sort of got the ball rolling on this. So Bee City is a collection of cities that have implemented a best practices approach to how to sort of foster and bee activity. So within that organization, there's an awful lot of information about what we should do and what we shouldn't do.
You good?
Yeah.
Mr. Bessie?
Just a note of interest. I read in the past week or so an article suggesting that the problems with the European honeybee may be encouraging a revival of some of our native pollinators, which would be a good thing if that occurs.
Mr. Larson?
One comment in that this Bee City is part of our overall, I think, mosaic of what we're trying to do for sustainability within the city, and we're going to see later the revitalization of the sustainability program and director. Specifically regarding this, one question I had just from where the money goes, it says $500 basic fee, but it also then later says that renewals will be based on Winston-Salem's population. Is that $500 the baseline for a city our size, or is it based on the
Yes, sir.
It is. So
it is
that fee would be standard. That
Yes,
$500 is a fixed fee.
Based on the current population.
Yeah, that's a bargain. Happy to have it.
Is there a motion?
Just another comment. If you go to any farmer's market anywhere in this county, the district, anywhere, there will always be an abundance of bee farmers. That's just the way it is now. And they have everything. They can get you any kind of honey, whether it's lavender, whether it's any kind of flower. And for those of you that don't know, go do your research. Bee honey is very good if it's great bee honey, meaning you got some people out here, and the bee farmers are concerned too about how pure honey is and what other stimulants and things people are using to beef up their bee pollination and production. So my comments to all of you are, get you some honey. Go up to our farmers market, up to the fairgrounds, and they got some great bee vendors up there that's got everything from the honey, the soap, everything that you can imagine. It's great.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, no. That is unanimous. And I've also heard if you partake of your local honey, if you have sinus issues, helps with your sinus.
That's true.
Item C6.
I just thought it tasted good.
Item C6, information submitted on the assessment of housing need in Winston-Salem for Forsyth County.
I asked for this to be pulled, and it was to be pulled for two things, and that was in reference to some of the action items that were listed there. There were two things that I didn't see that I wanted to see if it's possible for us to make sure we include there, if it may be something that's deeper in one of the items, and that was something we discussed before, and that is the creation and establishment of an affordable housing commission in the city of Winston-Salem, made up of members from the development community, grassroots individuals, and local individuals who can actually come together to really figure out for us locally what makes sense and how can we really create long-term affordable housing in the community as one of our actual action items with this. And if it's already included in one of those items that were there, I'm good to go. If not, I'd like for that to be something added to it.
Chairman Montgomery, council committee members, actually that's a part of item number 4,
Okay.
where we start with the summit or the forum as that first initial bringing together of people to have the conversation about what that commission could look like and what we would do.
Okay.
And what our marching orders would be.
Okay. That is what I just wanted to make sure we lifted up, because I think that's going to be important long-term.
It's here.
What is there. All right. Is there a
Oh,
motion?
okay.
Information.
It's information.
So it's information?
It's information.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. Item C8.
C7?
C7?
7, I had 7.
C7.
Yeah, I have 7.
Item C7, consideration of a resolution approving the amended and restated declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions of Lake Park subdivision.
Yeah, just on page 2 of the staff report, item 4 says these are new covenants or whatever you call them for Lake Park. It says we'll have a minimum appraised value for new dwellings of $110,000, and then if you go down to number 5, it says additionally the minimum dollar value of any dwelling and lot in the subdivision is gone from $150 to $195. So I was just confused.
It's going to go from $150 to $195.
Then what does number 4 do?
I think that's a typo. It should be
Currently
150.
listed.
It's currently listed as 150.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
but number 4, that 110 is not correct.
Should be,
No.
it should be 150, which is the current number. And then 5 raises it to 195.
Okay, that's fine. And it would, if the staff for the meeting Monday night could just give me what the average is in there, just to be sure we're high enough.
Now, this is for information only, so it's standing committee.
Okay.
Never mind.
That's fine.
Okay.
Just when we come for a resolution.
Okay.
And I know, and Clark, and this,
Done.
Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I assume we're doing this because we are now assuming responsibility for the quality control of the housing in this area. Is that right? Like a homeowners association, we're now acting as the holders of the deed covenants. The city is.
Yes and no. So I will give that to the city attorney, but one of the commitments that we made to the community when we took these properties back is that we would restore as close to the original covenants that the neighborhood and community was originally designed for, and the initial people who built, they were changed to be able to allow smaller and homes to be built that did not fall in line with the original development, and the neighborhood wanted those covenants restored so that in the future houses would be developed to the same standard. And that's been the conversation. Madam Attorney?
Yes, that's correct. There is, will remain a homeowners association, but in addition to the homeowners association, there are restrictive covenants on record. And when we purchased the 22 lots, we stepped into the shoes of the declarant, Lake Park subdivision. So now the declarant is the city of Winston-Salem. And so we have rights and obligations under the covenants. And I sat with a couple of the homeowners in that Lake Park subdivision to discuss potential changes to the covenant, dealing with, amongst other things, the sizes of the dwellings and so forth. But the city is basically the declarant at this point.
So are we the enforcement agency on these covenants then?
Essentially, we are, but
Right.
the homeowners association has some responsibilities too in terms of liens and the assessments and things like that.
But if we go to court, we're the ones that would do that.
We could, as well as the homeowners
Yeah, good.
association.
Okay.
And I do see Mr. Ward and Mr. Hall in the back who are in the neighborhood and part of the association there. So thank you all for being present as well.
Thank you.
All right, that is for information only. Bring action item. So include Mr. Clark's comments for next time. All right, item C8.
Item C8, consideration of a resolution requesting Forsyth County Board of Commissioners evaluate the 2013 and 2017 tax reevaluation process to determine if changes are warranted to the schedule of value standards and rules and the implementation thereof.
Who's here to speak on this item? Is there no, I'm saying the staff person. Who's the staff? City attorney?
You back up.
And I asked for this item to be pulled, particularly because I just wanted to raise up a conversation in reference to this. I made the request to the council initially when the council passed the original resolution to the county. The county at the time deemed our request to be out of order because of timing, despite the fact that our legal staff talked with the legal staff at the county prior to engaging those conversations. They did, however, go back and do some, I use air quotes, some reviewing of some of the processes. But there consistently continues to be parts of our community who feels as though the revaluation and appraisal process it does not take into account several factors that does not give true valuations to properties in certain areas of our community, and wanted to make sure that we submitted some type of request to the county in a manner that they could not deem to be out of order in terms of that review. Madam Attorney, did you have any other?
No other comments. Just basically, the purpose of the resolution is to ask that they review, I guess, the schedules and values and so forth ahead of time to make sure they're fair, and not only in terms of what those schedules and values might be, but in terms of how they're implemented. So the purpose of the resolution would be to simply ask them to review that to promote fairness in the next reval process in 2021.
I'll also have this one. Aren't they somewhat restricted? I thought the state set how appraisals were to be done.
I mean, there are some restrictions by statute in terms of how they're done, but there is some flexibility in terms of how it's implemented that I think, depending upon how the schedules and values are implemented, they might be implemented in a manner that's fairer than other manners, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we change anything, but I think it might be helpful if we knew some specific things we would like for them to look at. Because if the state has some overlying guidelines and we have some suggestions, maybe we ought to suggest them.
I think there's some suggestions in there relative to when you're doing the evaluation, potentially doing not only an outside inspection but an inside inspection. So there's
things
some
like
things in there just in terms of implementation where I think there is more control on the county level than perhaps in other areas.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense.
Mr. McIntosh.
I just had a question on one of the whereases. This might perhaps suggest that the lease value should be considered in the tax reappraisal process. There's no definition of what lease value is. It's not a term that I recognize from the appraisal process.
Okay.
To me, that relates to a market value, which is based on a calculation of
So you're suggesting
income.
a definition or clarify what is meant by that?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable passing this forward without knowing what
Okay.
that's talking about.
We can clarify that.
Thank you.
I assume we're talking about revenue generating capacity, the ability, and I think this is based on landlords renting properties and generating income that would indicate that the property is more valuable.
Yeah, but at least there's a very specific set of terminology
We can,
within the statute.
so try to find that term, but I think
the income approach
the
to it.
point, you're right. There's an income value, right?
Right, which is already taken into account, so I'm wondering why that's different than what is done now.
Is not taken into account on most residential, single-family residential properties. And one of the challenge areas is the fact that we have large demographics of our community that have transitioned from owner-occupied to rental, and you have for instance, a valuation of $25,000 on a property, yet a person is charging $800-900, and over the course of a valuation, if you use the income approach for that same unit in a multifamily complex, you would get a much higher valuation. And so the question then becomes, does this reflect truly on what the values in this community is if we use a direct market approach on sales, which gives a different valuation on that? Which are some of the concerns that exist? I've presented to this committee before my own properties. I own one now. I used to own two. One property at one point in time was worth $150,000. After evaluation, worth $75,000. When I challenged it, they restored the value up to about $125,000 after they came back into the property. property I live in today was valued at $60,000 on the tax rolls. When I challenged that value, my current property value is now $220,000 when they actually reviewed my property within a mile of each other. I'm not an anomaly. There's something wrong with the process. Ms. Adams?
No, I was just going to say, I agree. Again, just like all systems, there comes a point in time where you have to review those systems and the process to make sure it's current with where we are now. Over the years, I don't think until we had those last couple of property revaluations, has the city been so, the people that's been affected by it the most. In light of a recession, we got that. But there is something wrong when you have a section of town that you just say that the properties aren't worth this anymore based on the value of what we say it is. You know, there's just something not right about that. So whatever we can do to make this fair to the people that own properties in these neighborhoods and the people that live in them, the people, the landlords or whoever, but it's got to be fair. You can't continually escalate the value of properties on one side of town and devalue on another side of town. The perception is from the people that live there is that when we talk about, like yesterday, this staged gentrification thing, the people that come in and buy up the property are the people that don't look like the people that live in the neighborhood. And then they buy the property, they fix it up, and then they rent them, escalating them up. And they're making all this money, and it's just not right. I agree with any time we can stop the process and evaluate it, the system, and see what we need to do to, again, make sure our citizens are being treated fairly in a just system. So I'm agreeing with Councilmember Montgomery and all of those of us who've been more than approached over the past decade almost of having to listen to people about their homes and what's happened to them in their neighborhoods. Again, as we said, these people don't move anywhere. They continue to stay in the neighborhood, but how are we going to build up the neighborhoods if we continue to devalue the properties when in the way I grew up, the land is always valuable. But now we got structures on them that people don't want us tearing them down, but yet you got land people that come in and buy the properties and they don't do anything to even try to build the properties up. So anything that we can do to stop this right now, or for everybody to circle the wagons and come to the table, the county and the city, then I think it's only benefits those folks that live in those communities. I do.
Mr. Chairman.
One last comment, then.
Yeah. Maybe our attorney or city manager, how much authority does the city council have on the tax office, and do we have the ability to ask the tax collector to appear on this committee and answer some of these questions? We talk among ourselves a lot about this, and if there are if the state regulations and stuff applicable that we are not aware of, he could inform us of that. But if there's the option to look at income production capability on domestic properties and things like that, I think it would be useful to get that resolved.
I certainly think this tax assessor can be invited to attend a meeting. I think he has appeared a couple of times in the past, and I'm sure he'd be willing to attend another meeting. But in terms of, I guess, our ability to impact the tax assessor is very limited. But however, I will say that pursuant to an interlocal agreement between the city and the county, of course, the county tax assessor collects the city taxes for the city. But certainly he can be invited to attend a future meeting if that's the desire of the committee.
All right. Mr. Mack, did you have another comment?
I was just going to say that I'm sure the state wouldn't allow this, but I'd be happy if we just let people pick their own tax value as long as it was what the appraiser said it was. Because I don't believe it affects resale value. I think it's a reflection of resale value. It's not a leading indicator. But I know that's not going to happen.
Is there a motion from the committee?
This is for information.
Oh, it's information? Okay. All right. All right. With that, we will take up. Hold on. There was
C9.
C9.
It'd be great for us.
Item C9.
You almost skipped the whole thing.
Right. Item C9.
Item C9, ordinance ordering the demolition and removal of a structure, repairs less than 50%, located at 2633 Peachtree Street, owner Sharon C. Craver.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This property is owned by Sharon C. Craver. This property was originally cited in October of 2016. The violations, there are 5, but 3 make the property uninhabitable. The list pendants was filed and is obtainable through a title search. The due process was followed as outlined in the city's ordinance and policies and detailed on the history page. Mr. Craver is here he contacted the office today, wishes to ask for more time. However, I do need to explain that the property was heard back in March.
Yes.
And then it was held over until April and then placed back on our agenda for today. So there has been time that the committee has granted, and a voluntary demolition agreement was sent to the property owner that allowed 4 months that was received by the property owner. And I have listed or explained, and it's on your history page, but for those that are here, the estimated cost to repair the structure is $1,762. That's the fair market, and the fair market value of the structure is $15,000. I have some pictures here to show you. These are the previous pictures that you saw back in earlier this year in March, and then the property was continued in April. Shows some fascia damage, a little bit of roof damage, and then yesterday, this property looks in the same condition. All 4 of these photographs were taken yesterday. The same damage seems to be on the outside of the property.
All right. I do remember this item coming before us and is affording additional time at that time. Won't you come give your name and address for the record?
Randy Craver, 1422 Reedy Creek Road, Lexington.
All right, Mr. Craver, a couple questions for you. One, why haven't you been able to get the property up to par in the time frame that's been allotted? If I recall, you're representing the owner on this property.
That's my wife.
Your wife? Oh,
Me and her own it.
Okay.
One reason we've had more to do than we can do, and I've hired a carpenter to do it, paid him some money, and about 3 weeks ago he broke his arm and told me it was going to be 4 to 5 more months before he got it done, and I just ain't had time to do it. I told him that, I got a mother that's 80 years old I tried to take care of, and I got a mother-in-law that's 90, and I just ain't had time to do it.
And so I
run 2 businesses.
And I understand that, and I think the committee, and I won't speak on behalf of them in the midst of it, but if I recall our conversation last time, it was one to help understand that it's never the desire of this committee to tear a house down. It's always in terms of how we can preserve the property and ensure that it continues to contribute. But at the same time, once it's cited, the neighbors and the people in the neighborhood now have to deal with blighted property within the community. And the committee has to also keep in mind the fact that there are other people in their neighborhood at the same time as they afford opportunity to people to continue to make the repairs on the property. And so there has to be some balance. And so understand life happens and that there are challenges in the midst of life and they happen. But at the same time, the respect of the committee granting that time, that we would ask that you would respect the fact that we did give you some additional time to take care of that. And I don't know, I'll look to, Councilmember Taylor is not present, and this is in the Southeast Ward, but I would look to the committee on how, if there's comments on how to proceed with the item.
Can I say something else?
So just a second, I just want to hear if there's a thought from the committee.
I'd let him speak in
Let
that.
him speak
Go ahead.
first.
You're making the comment about the people that lives in the community that takes care of it. I have went up there, in the last 3 to 4 years, probably 15 times and took a dump truck and a trailer and picked up off the side of the road. I'm talking about a dump truck full of garbage that the people in front of it pile in front of my house. And she can check, Mr. Green, and had to haul it off. They don't care about how they live. I mean, I wouldn't want, I do have a phone call here from a neighbor that called me last week that's been looking after it for me to keep that from happening. And that, I mean, that's just the way the people are living, that where it's at. I'm telling you, a full dump truck and a loader and scooped it all up the side of the road and had to haul it off. It wasn't on the curb, it was in the highway and the curb. I mean, I've had to take time out and do that as well. So, and when I do it, I want to do more than spend their $2,000 or $3,000. I'm talking about spending 15 or 20 on it. But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right and be done with it.
So what's the timeline that you need for repair?
Well, I talked to my carpenter, and he said he'd try to get it done. I mean, I'd like to have another 6 months to try to get it straightened out, but I'd like to do it right. I don't want to halfway do it.
Again,
I own quite a bit of property in other places, too, that when I do something, I do it right.
Mr. Craver, just a second. As a property owner, it is, and I want to try to
I understand.
articulate myself in a way that is respectful of this space. But as a property owner, no matter how many properties you own, it is your responsibility
Right.
to care for those properties and to make sure that they are up to par. If you own one property or 100 properties, it is your responsibility as a property owner to care for them. As a property owner, there's a bus stop right down the street from my house. I pick up trash, bottles, and others. It's my house. I pick it up because I care about it and I care about the appearance of what's right in front of my driveway.
I agree with you.
I'm just sharing. But to the committee, how would you like to move on this item?
The ordinance before us gives 3 months. If you look at the list of violations, and this is now almost 2 years old, it's gutters and downspouts, exterior paint, replace loose wall and ceiling materials, fix the fascia, repair the door. I don't think that's going to be unreasonable to ask that be done in the next 3 months, so I'd move approval of the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there additional comments?
Just an additional comment. One of the reasons that we try not to allow these kind of cases to continue, where the house is obviously broken down and not lived in, is people come and dump trash at those sites. So these become magnets for trash.
This is the people that live right in front of it.
Sir,
Thank you.
in our experience, which collectively is pretty long, we find that houses that are in this kind of shape attract that problem.
Oh, it's
Okay.
drugs and everything else.
Okay, so our perspective is that the longer these stay around in this condition, the worse they become. Okay, they generate their own set of problems. So we want to have this taken care of as quickly as possible. The impact to the neighbors is as small as possible. And the list of items to be done to satisfy this does not seem extremely long or expensive.
I could go up there and halfway do
This-
it, but I want to do it right.
Thank you, Mr. Craver. We're no longer in the comment period. The committee's discussing this at this time.
I do have one question. How long have you owned this property?
Bought it in 1989 or 90.
And how long has it been vacant?
Last 8 or 9 years.
And why, in that period of time, have you not spent a couple $1,000s to get it up into shape? In that many years, now you've left this building that vacant, and now you're in front of us once again, asking for more time. I think this council is being very generous to you to allow you another 3 months to fix it, and I hope that you'll have it fixed next time, and we don't have to see you again. Thank you, sir.
There's a motion on the floor that has been moved and properly second. All in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, likewise. That is unanimous. Pass the motion as set forth in the agenda book. Mr. Craver, you'll see staff. They can explain further exactly what this item means. It will come to the full council on Monday for final approval, but staff can tell you exactly what this means for you and the exact allotment of time that's there. Ms. Newman, will you make sure that Mr. Craver understands the process? Thank you. With that, we will move to the general agenda. Without objection, committee members, we did have item that was reviewed yesterday in the Finance Committee where majority of council was present in reference to the Silas Creek Parkway initiative there. Without objection, Peters Creek. Y'all know what I mean. Peters Creek Parkway initiative. Without objection, if we take that item first, and if there's no additional questions to the individuals who are present for that, I'd entertain an action on that.
I'll move approval of it since it was thoroughly vetted yesterday at Finance, and everyone at the table was there yesterday.
All right. That's been moved and properly second. All in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, likewise. That is unanimous. Thank you all very much for your work and commitment there. All right. With that, we will move to item G2.
Item G2, ordinance revising Chapter B of the Unified Development Ordinances to allow residential building, townhouse and residential building, multifamily and highway businesses and general office districts with planning board review and remove the uses residential building, duplex and residential building, twin home from the general business district. Modified September 2018 proposal with changes highlighted, UDO 283. It was proposed by Planning and Development Services, recommended by the Planning Board. The item was continued from the February, May, and August meetings of the Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee.
All right. What you have for us?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Good afternoon.
The committee's been discussing this item for several months and asked staff to prepare an item to take action on this month. The current planning board version of UDO 283 limits multifamily in HB to sites larger than 1 acre along legacy growth corridors and within activity centers. The recommendation for GO remains unchanged. Staff was also asked to investigate the following at the last meeting. What specific parcels would be included in the recommended ordinance? How would multifamily site plans be reviewed? And how could a potential citizen objection process work? The maps included in your packets show all HB and GO parcels that would be included in this ordinance change. For GO parcels, we also included a spreadsheet of addresses, owners, and owner addresses. And this slide shows just a detail of the map. It's a good example of how the updated ordinance works. It shows the parcels along 2 growth corridors and a couple activity centers, and then the circles are HB parcels that would not be included in this ordinance because they're not located along any of those areas. So on the question of site plan review, multifamily and HB and GO have identical review processes, would have identical review processes as in other zoning districts. Planning staff reviews all multifamily that fronts on existing public streets or those of 6 units or fewer. The planning board reviews site plans for all other multifamily developments. Height and setback requirements are determined by the underlying zoning district, and additionally there are standards for each land use, and for residential building multifamily and residential building townhouse, there are standards for driveways, parking areas, internal streets, architectural features, and required recreation areas. This would apply to all multifamily types. Whether they were an infill development in a commercial shopping center, whether you're talking about converting floors of an existing office building to residential uses, or a complete redevelopment, or just a brand new development of multifamily housing. All of these would apply. Multifamily in HB or GO districts would have a minimum 40-foot setback from residential zoning and a type 3 buffer yard. This is in comparison to multifamily zoning districts such as RM18, which have a minimum setback of between 7 and 25 feet from residential zoning, and then RM zoning districts would require a type 2 buffer yard as compared to the type 3 if they were adjacent to single-family zoning. On the question of a potential citizen objection process, multiple issues would need to be addressed before such a process could be established. You know, we would want to look at who would need to be notified in the event of a multifamily development application. Would it just be residents within a certain radius of the development? Would it be anybody in the city? Would it be just residents who are interested, perhaps neighborhood associations? We would need to ask who would have standing to object. Could it be just those neighbors nearby, or again, anybody in the city? And how many objections would be necessary to trigger a public hearing? Would it need to be a certain percentage, just one person? And what would the time frame for that objection be? Would it be before the planning board meeting, during the planning board meeting, or sometime in the future, possibly even after construction has started? So one possible procedure that we talked about would be posting a sign advertising any proposed multifamily development in HB or GO on the property for 10 days prior to a planning board meeting. Any citizen who objected could request that City Council consider the development with a public hearing in a legislative setting. But the city attorney believes such a procedure would be highly susceptible to a successful legal challenge. And the planning staff believes that if public input is desired, we recommend extinguishing this text amendment instead and using the existing rezoning process rather than creating a parallel citizen objection process. And staff would recommend the committee endorse the updated planning board version of UDO 283 to the full council. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Are there questions from the committee? Mr. Clark?
Real quick, currently in highway business and GO, because those are the two we're talking about, what type of residential is permitted by ordinance currently?
None is permitted in either of those districts.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I have a comment.
Okay. Mr. Larson?
Let me give you a hypothetical on this, if you could. We have a shopping center that's zoned highway business, and it is demolished because it's dysfunctional and gone dark. Is there anything in this ordinance that precludes them coming in and basically doing a multi-family housing unit exclusive of any commercial development on that piece of property? In other words, you have a highway business zone category, but what you're really doing is residential development.
No, there wouldn't be anything stopping
There's no safeguards against that kind of scenario.
Sorry?
There's no safeguards against that kind of scenario.
No, there wouldn't be. It would be the same as any other use that would be allowed in the HB zoning district, whether it was a shopping center or
the design guidelines for that residential development on an HB site would conform to what you listed up there as far as setbacks, heights, and other matters, right?
That's correct.
Which are basically designed to be compatible with surrounding residential areas.
That's correct.
With accelerated buffer areas, driveways, things like that. So even though your zoning allows HB, which would be commercial parameters, the residential component is still meeting residential standards of a residential development.
That's correct.
Other questions? This is an item that the committee has discussed and vetted for some time. I think we have given a lot of opportunity for the public concerns that were that came up in and around this. Particularly the largest public concern that we heard was around how do citizens who live in and around these properties participate in that process. One of the items, one of the things that came up, and I just want to be respectful, one of the emails that was sent to me, again, reiterating a concern that individuals had, was in reference to, again, citizens not being able to participate in the property, and a concern around displacement of individuals. But the fact is that currently on these properties, there is no residential housing. So no one would be displaced by redevelopment of those properties because no one currently lives on the properties today. It would only allow for additional housing to be developed on the property and not taking away from housing on those properties. So this is an opportunity to potentially increase housing in the city and not detract from the housing. And that's, again, one of the concerns that I received an email about today, and just wanted to reiterate that to respond to that concern so that it can be in the record that we did speak to that concern. Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I was not at the last meeting. I would like to speak on behalf of it. We just did this in the West Ward. Y'all voted on it at the last council meeting. Out at the old L.A. Reynolds landscaping, and it was out on, you go way out Country Club and you turn left on Stires Ferry. It's kind of, it's a creek down there. It is no longer there, and it was a highway business type operation. It is, and it was, they sold landscaping. They had nurseries there, and you could get pine needles and trees and bushes and all that kind of stuff. And they had a retail store and everything. We're going in there with a little bit of restaurant and retail on the ground floor, and because it's on a hill above that are going to be apartments, and then down by the lake, we have a lake with the apartments. Mr. Montgomery just stole some of my thunder. This can't be gentrification because no one's living there now. We're not displacing anybody. What we're doing is making it a little bit easier to put the apartments in. I'm a bit perplexed why there is so much animosity against this, because most people would prefer to have apartments next to them versus a shopping center. And there seems to be, I guess, a disconnect there. And I will say, if we make this difficult to do, and I do believe these types of ventures are the wave of the future, a combined neighborhood type approach where you got a little bit of everything, particularly, and you see it, you go down to Bailey Power Plant, we just built that big parking deck, and we're wrapping apartments around it. But I believe at least on 5th Street, they're going to put retail or restaurants or whatever on the ground floor, because it's a 4-lane road there. And I think this combination is going to be something that a lot of people want to do. But if you've got to go through an ordinance and an expensive rezoning process, I think you're only going to see it in the upper income areas, because the risk is you risk all that money and you don't get it rezoned. And I know some people that are against it that are against everything, but I see this, and I welcome these in the West Ward, where I can combine small retail and commercial establishments with some apartments above them, and I think that would be a nice addition to our community.
Do I hear a motion, Mr. Clark?
Yes, sir. I will move approval. We'll see what happens.
Is there a second? Second. That movement second had two, Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Bessie.
Okay.
Yeah. I have to vote no on the motion as it's made. The problem is not with the HB district. I agree with the suggestion that multifamily housing is going to be less impactful than the uses that are allowed as of right in the HB zones. I think it is harder to make that argument generically in the case of the GO zones. And I make that point because, in particular, there is a concentration of GO zone adjacent to the backside of an isolated but nice and viable, modest residential area in my ward that I am concerned could be potentially adversely impacted by the high density multifamily use to a greater degree than the GO uses that they're used to, basically, that are, as Mr. Clark has pointed out in a case on which we disagreed, there are instances in which the GO office use is actually less impactful to adjoining properties than a higher density residential use. For that reason, I cannot support this change with respect to the GO districts generically. I could support it if it was just the HB districts, and my suggestion would have been to separate the two and move forward with them on a separated basis. If we're going to include the GO districts generically, I have to vote no. I would prefer to vote yes on the HB district.
Mr. McIntyre?
This works for me on a couple different levels. We already are facing a lack of housing unit production from the period of 2008, 2009 through 2015. There was nothing built. Population still increased during those periods of time. Growing at 1%, we add 2,000 people a year to this community, and we are not building enough to keep up. So that drives pricing. Anything we can do to make it easier, incent developers to build more residential housing with guidelines, not willy-nilly, I think will help everybody from a pricing standpoint. Cyclically, we're seeing interest in office buildings decline. There's not as much, people are not building offices, they're not increasing office space, and where they are, they're looking to be downtown in the central business district. So we have an awful lot of surplus land that is not going to be developed as office space in the next, my prediction, 10 to 15 years. I would rather see that land put back in use and come out of tax rolls as residential, and therefore increase the quantity and try to deal with our affordability problem. The impacts to neighborhoods, I know that's where the fear is. I'm not certain about the case that Mr. Bessie's talking about, but in my view, they will be minor, and it looks to me like the safeguards that we're building in are more strict than what would be allowed to go in there before from a setback and a buffer standpoint. On the whole, I think this is a win for everybody. I think the fear will go away once this is in place and some projects get done. I just don't think the impact is what people think it will be.
A question, Madam Attorney, or Sir, I keep looking, I'm sorry.
Mr. Attorney.
Mr. Attorney, would there be an issue with doing on this item for Monday an A and a B, pretty much G2A with HB and then B with approval for GO, just to respect Councilmember Bessie's request in terms of he can support part of it, but maybe not the other, and if we split them up, it's the same thing, but just approving them, the usage in different areas?
I'll be happy to answer that question.
Okay.
I think because we basically have talked about both, I don't think there's a problem in terms of the public being informed of the item if you were to separate it out, where you would have one for HB and maybe one for HB and GO, so that one can move forward and not the other. I think if that's the desire of the committee.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment, that we have a G2A and a G2B.
In that case, I can vote yes.
And if my secretary will accept that.
Second.
Thank you. And with A being HB and B being GO. How's that?
Okay.
Does that work alphabetically?
So is that the motion that you guys are voting on?
One would be HB only, and the other would be HB and GO.
Yeah, so tell me what you want to.
Hold on, let me make
Oh,
sure.
that's
That's different.
Oh,
No, we were saying separating.
HB.
cut the baby in half.
And then HBA as a, one item.
But vote on both.
Yeah, so you have, and then the second, we have this item, if it was on the agenda, G2, we have A that approves these uses as outlined in HB, and then a B that approves the usages in GO.
Okay.
So there would be two different votes.
Two separate votes. I
Yeah,
think
for
that's
those.
okay. Because they both have gone through the process, basically.
Okay,
It's just a separation.
all right. All right. What's the pleasure of the committee understanding that as the motion?
I will move G2A, which is to approve the thing for HB only.
The votes have been cast?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's done.
It's unanimous.
Yeah.
And it is unanimous. We'd already captured the votes.
I withdraw my comment.
All right. We'll now move on to item G3. Item G3.
Item G3, ordinance revising chapters A and B of the Unified Development Ordinances to add a new use titled Group Care Facility C, Therapeutic Community, UDO 287, proposal of Triangle Residential Options for Substance Abusers, Inc., recommended by...
Good afternoon, committee members, members of council. I just want to introduce one of our newest staff members, Mr. Brian Wilson, who will actually be making a brief presentation on behalf of the staff and the board for this item. and we have the petitioners here. This is an external text amendment, and they'll be going into a more detailed presentation about the specifics of what they hope to see happening in our community.
All right, thank you very much. And I know I see Senator Craywick out there as well, who's here in support of the group as well. So good to see you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, council members. This is text amendment UDO 287. As mentioned by Kirk, this is petitioner is Triangle Residential Options for Substance Abusers, otherwise known as TROSA. They're requesting the addition of a new use to the UDO titled Group Care Facility C, Therapeutic Community. TROSA is a nonprofit organization that operates a large, long-term residential substance abuse facility in Durham, North Carolina. TROSA is interested in opening a similar facility in the Triad with the goal of accommodating up to 250 residents. The proposed use is most similar to the existing UDO uses, Group Care Facility A and B. However, these uses only allow for up to 40 residents. The proposed Group Care Facility C use would be required to accommodate TROSA's desired 250 resident facility. The proposed use would only be allowed in the general business zoning district through a special use district rezoning, so it would come before you. And there are additional use conditions that are also proposed for this use. You can look in your packet. This item is scheduled to appear for City Council public hearing on October 1st. With that, I'll introduce Brian Bullen, the TROSA representative, to present that.
As you're coming, I'm going to ask a question of timing on your presentation, just how long you think that, you come on, just in terms of how long you think your presentation is. Okay. Give your name and address for the record for those who will be speaking.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Dan Jewell. I'm a landscape architect with Coulter Jewell Thames in Durham. We've been working with TROSA for many years, and with me this afternoon are Brian Bullen, the project manager for TROSA, and also Kevin McDonald, who's the founder and president of TROSA. Just briefly, a little background information. There's a critical need for a licensed program with transitional housing, which provides room and board, personal care, and rehabilitation services while persons receive therapy and or counseling, primarily to assist them to recuperate from the effects or refrain from the use of drugs or alcohol. Brian will speak to this in a little more detail in a few minutes. The current permitted use designations in the UDO would not allow such a facility, particularly of this scale. And so in working with the staff, what we are proposing is a new use category, as Mr. Wilson said, Group Care Facility C, that would allow these facilities to be located somewhere in the city and county. But the definition be written with very tight language that would require a very well-regulated, proven, experienced, and licensed agency, such as TROSA, to operate such a facility. We want to set this bar extremely high, and TROSA is currently one of the only a few such entities in the state that have the experience and a licensure to operate such a facility. We ask you also keep in perspective as you're going through your deliberation that we are not asking you to approve a project or a zoning this afternoon. We are simply trying to create a use category in the ordinance that will allow us to pursue a zoning. Again, as Brian said, a special use rezoning with a site plan attached for a site. And so that hopefully gives you comfort that you're not approving anything tonight other than for us to pursue a site and get this zoning in place. So with that, I'm going to sit down and let Brian Bullen explain a little bit more about the need and about TROSA's operation and what it is, the good work that they do. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Brian Bullen, 1820 James Street, Durham, North Carolina. And I'm here this evening to provide more of an educational overview of what TROSA is, how we operate in Durham, and kind of the reason we're here in front of everyone today. So TROSA is a licensed long-term residential recovery program that focuses mainly on those suffering from substance use disorder. We are licensed by the state through the Department of Health and Human Services, And we've been around for a long time. We were founded in 1994 with only 13 residents. But currently, we serve approximately 500 residents in our 2-year program on a daily basis, with another 50 or 60 of those who remain into our continuing care program, and currently located only in Durham, North Carolina, but we do have several facilities throughout Durham to help support all those operations. A little bit of scope. Last year, we served close to 1,000 residents throughout our fiscal year. And generally, again, our focus is substance use disorder, but that population, that demographic, also is heavily touched by homelessness. Nearly all of our residents come to us, unstable housing. Nearly 90% have had a previous interaction with the criminal justice system. Almost all of our residents are unstable or unemployed by the time they get to us, and about a third of them are diagnosed with some sort of mental health co-occurring disorder. So what TROS is, for our residents, we provide the daily needs of a program, of a 2-year residential program, at no cost to those individuals. People don't need insurance. They don't pay us a penny to get accepted to the program. But part of our program is we provide the basic essentials of life: housing, food, clothing, and daily needs. We've also partnered with all of the kind of medical and network providers in the Research Triangle area, Durham area, to provide primary level care of service for our residents on site at our campus, but also advanced level of medical healthcare services through those partnerships in the local communities. We also, again, focus on that co-occurring disorder of mental health, and do have several clinicians on staff that see our residents on a daily basis. But also, we use evidence-based therapies and classes integrated with our program to ensure we are giving the best from a mental health and care standpoint that we can give to our residents. One of the hallmarks of our program is the vocational training element that we provide to our residents. So those consist of activities that help support the operations, but also activities that help drive revenue for the program while also providing a skill. Some of those that support the operations, we have nearly 300 vehicles in our fleet, so we have a large automotive training program to help maintain those vehicles. We have close to 30 plus properties throughout Durham, so we have a construction and maintenance program that teaches people skills in how we maintain those properties, how we develop those properties, while also being part of the program. We have an extensive moving company that does over 5,000 moves a year, a pretty significant lawn care company, and then also a large thrift store operation. That's an old Walmart. So all these things are run by either staff members who are mostly graduates of the program, or the residents themselves help foster a work ethic, accountability, while integrating with that therapeutic community and program that we're a part of. This last bullet here, we do offer, once a resident does complete the 2 years of the formal program, we do offer 1 year of continuing care for graduates, which is low-cost housing, a ride to and from work if they don't have their license. If we can get donated vehicles, we'll give those to the graduates, have our automotive shop repair them. But continuing to set people up for success in the long term, and not just kind of let them back out there after the 2 years. So again, to highlight a few of those things that make us unique, we are a extensive 2-year program that's a voluntary program at no cost to individuals. We do focus on co-occurring mental health and substance use disorder. We emphasize vocational training and education, and one of our big goals is reintegration of our residents back into their families, their communities, and ultimately beneficial members of society. A little bit about, we're a 2-year program, very few like us around the state, but we really focus on the importance of length of time in treatment. And these are just a few statistics of how we measure. Our average stay is approximately 1 year. Our median is closer to 10 months. But looking at the demographics and who we serve, when we compare that population, the national average for long-term programs is less than 2 months. And then we do have a high in comparison completion rate for our 30-day window. We're getting more data internally, partnering with institutions like RTI that have proven to us from our resident history, the longer that residents stay with us, the less likely they are to reoffend in the criminal justice system. And those are kind of things we are looking at, continuing to get better, making sure we're doing the right things and creating positive outcomes for those residents who come for help. And a few of those outcomes here, this is 1 year after post-graduation. Over 90% of our residents are in stable housing, have maintained recovery, have remained fully employed, and less than 5% have a new criminal conviction. That's 1 year post-graduation of our program. So why are we here? We get over 100 calls a day to our intake department, inquiries about either family members or those who are suffering from substance use disorder, needing help. We've kind of reached a critical capacity in Durham with 500 residents. The right decision for us was not to continue to grow the operation in Durham. As a therapeutic community, we very much rely on the cohesiveness of the community and use it as a method of change. So we feel the satellite campus approach is the right way to help more people, to expand our mission, and that's what led us to the triad. And what we're looking to do is at first establish a new residential type community within the triad, starting with approximately 100 beds, but eventually the end goal would be to be around 200 residents at that new facility. And we didn't just make that number up. Programmatically, as a therapeutic community, that's kind of the key target of what is, for the most successful outcomes, is having that 200 resident community to connect with, have that peer support group, and best as a program for us to get to. But also, that number provides us, it enables us to become close to financially sustainable once we hit that critical mass of 200 and ensure our long-term success wherever we land. So to date, we've received some significant support to help make this reality. Forsyth and Guilford counties are two of the top 5 counties that we serve in our population, and we do see excellent opportunity here in Winston-Salem to integrate with healthcare provider, higher education partners, and we're very optimistic. We've had a lot of very positive conversations. I would like to say Senator Kravik has been very supportive at the legislature and would like to say a few words as well.
Give your name and address for the record.
Joyce Kravik, 7030 Interlaken Drive in Kernersville. Great to see all of you. And Chairman Montgomery, I'm looking forward to serving with you. I can't say enough good things about TROSA. The numbers speak for themselves. Their statistics speak for themselves. But I want to tell you how I first got involved with them. A young man from here in Winston-Salem who was a resident at TROSA came to visit me, and he just wanted to tell me about what I'd never heard of TROSA. Had no idea that they even existed. He told me how they had saved his life. And when he told me where he lived, I knew him. I knew his family. I knew him when he was a little boy, but hadn't seen him in many years. The long story, I went out to visit TROSA, and I would encourage any of you, if you're in the Durham area, please go visit it. It is a beautiful campus, and my understanding is they bought an old dairy and renovated it into this beautiful campus. And the whole area has been renovated around that campus. It was a pretty well rundown area of Durham, I think is putting it mildly. And now it is the housing. They bought a lot of the housing, but the houses have been renovated, businesses have moved in, and it's just a great facility. Their recidivism rate is like none I have ever heard of. And I was very fortunate to secure a grant for them in the hopes that we could find a location for them here. I can't say enough good things about them. I would encourage you to help all you can by giving this special use that they're asking for. And I'm looking forward to having them here. I think they will be a tremendous asset for our community. And if you were in Durham, you would see that. They have their own clinic there. The residents are all trained by I spoke to so many of the residents because I've been there a number of times, and they all tell me the same story, that this has saved their life. And many of them stay there and work, I've noticed, Kevin. They come back as a graduate. They work, they have a hospital clinic there. A clinic's not really a hospital. Everybody's a volunteer. The doctors are all volunteers, but they train those people. I met several ladies who were training to be medical technicians and getting their training right there on site. So it's a real blessing for Durham, and I think it would be for Winston-Salem. So I encourage your support.
That's all we have open for questions.
Okay. Are there questions or comments from the committee, and then other council members will come around? That's it. And then
Yeah, just a comment. It seems to be a very reasonable request, and from all I've been able to find on TROSA, has a very good record. It's a 501c3 not-for-profit. Has done well in Durham. Seems to be a good model to facilitate.
Again, thank you for what you're doing. We realize that organizations such as yours is much needed right now throughout the country. And, I'm sure any city in the state would be glad to call you a neighbor or home. The only question I have to you is looking through your PowerPoint presentation on the types of job skills and things that you do. The moving company, the landscaping, the retail, all that's great. But I also realize that we know the economy keeps moving, and a lot of times some of our folks find themselves in these situations because they don't have jobs that not only pay enough money to support them and their families, but jobs that allow them to grow and to become more sustainable and opportunity. So I was just hoping or would ask, what are the plans? I see you do vocational training, but does your training entail those high-skilled manufacturing jobs, skill sets that people need, whether it's welders, electronics, electricians, things like that? Because, everybody can do this, yeah, but at some point these same people are going to want more, just like the rest of us. So where do you stand on that?
Sure, absolutely, great question. And a lot of these, a lot of the training environments we're in now, really we're taking individuals coming from homelessness, unemployment, and it's a lot of baby steps to get them to where we'd like to see them as well. Part of that is we do offer, we do have a great partnership with Durham Tech Community College, and offer those more advanced classes, vocational training elements of them, while also, we say moving company, but a large number, several dozen of our residents get CDLs every year, which is one of those very sought after skill sets while at TROSA. That's something we continue to look at as we currently in Durham partner with companies that recruit our residents, because they are on time. They've got a 2-year track record of working very hard, being accountable for that work. But it's something we continue to look at as well. How do we continue to set our residents up for success? I would say a lot of the residents who were in the lawn care a year or two after TROSA are in another lawn care company, but they're managing it. So a lot of those moving company drivers are now managing other CDL drivers across the country. So it's not just a thing for us skill set, but also the management and accountability skills and leadership skills that they receive while at TROSA. Meanwhile, partnering with the vocational training elements from Durham Tech Community College, we would expect we would hope for a similar partnership here in Winston-Salem. And then we continue to look at other potential partnerships with corporations in the community like we have in Durham that continue to hire our residents at great rates, above salary wages, and continue to make us better.
The only thing, again, I'm looking forward my peers kind of know how I am.
Sure.
All I'm saying is, don't get me wrong, you seem to have a great model with print here. But for, if I would ask you your diversity numbers, I don't know what they would be, but I would know, again, you got a lot of people probably look like me. And all I'm saying is, there are a lot of philanthropic, great heart people and organizations and nonprofits all over the place, even in Forsyth County. We have a lot.
Sure.
But the thing that we always sometimes, for me, miss, even in talking to my folks and people, is nobody seems to want to think that they want more, just like us. And always everybody seems to me to be on the same track. I'm just asking, because if you're going to be in Forsyth, you just know I'm going to be checking up on you. I'm going to help you get there, because we got to now move out of just, making people or getting them to a point that they can live day to day. We got to get them to where they can thrive and survive. And that only happens when we give them an opportunity to improve their life. And I commend you for what you're doing. I see the years you've been doing this, but in the world we live in right now, people making $7, $8, $9, $10 is not cutting it, and that also drives people to dependency and drugs and crime and other things. So I'm wanting you to just be more proactive that, again, we're not going to leave you on the limb. We're going to help you, okay?
I appreciate the concern and comments. The last phase of our program is the last 3 months, our residents, their sole purpose is to find a job, a good paying job in the community. And again, we focus on that. We put a lot of time and effort towards that, and really try to find those community partners that will give them that kind of on the back end to capture for great employment. Whatever skill set they may have, but continue to get better on that as well. So thanks for
Thank you.
concern.
Councilman Clark. Councilman Taylor.
I think TROSA is a wonderful program. I've had the opportunity to sit down with you, the team, and Senator Kravick. I didn't really have a question, but I guess now that I have the floor, if I may, Mr. Chairman, it looks like heroin and opioids are on the rise, right? Sure. Also, some of the primary substance abusers in your facilities abuse crack, cocaine, and alcohol. What tends to be the swing? What does the demographics look like inside of your facility?
I can get exact numbers for you. It's approximately 50-50, 40-60, white and black. As far as demographics, it's about a 80-20 male-female split. And then our age demographics, we can pull them up as well.
Mr. Taylor,
we are seeing a younger population that is directly driven by that opioid.
Mr. Taylor, were you specifically asking around the drug usage demographic?
He answered it.
My apologies, misunderstood the question.
And so, no, thank you for answering it. So as heroin and opioids start to rise, we still accept those who are on crack, cocaine, and alcohol. I just want to make sure we're not leaning one way, because everybody needs the service if they're going to be in the community.
We accept everybody who needs help from substance use disorder. We are not targeting a specific use as far as primary use of drug. We are open doors, and anybody who comes to us and needs help and is a good fit for the program, we take.
And I ask because I have heard criticism of other programs that tend to only treat those who are on heroin or opioids. And I just wanted to make sure that we stated for the record that everybody's welcome to attend if they need help.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. McIntosh?
No, my question goes around the 30 properties that you own in Durham.
Yep.
Just a question of why do you own so many properties? What are they used for, that kind of thing?
We have 3 main campuses, residential properties, that house the 500 residents. We also have an old Walmart that acts as our thrift store, as well as 300,000 square foot of kind of industrial commercial space for the Eaton Company, Lonkin Company, and internal storage and warehousing. We then have close to probably 24 single-family or multi-family houses that we do rent out to our graduates in the program at a low affordable rate. So that over time, being at 500 residents with all the graduates creates a pretty significant residential footprint.
And your organization manages those? You act as the property manager on those?
We do.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Today, we're not voting on bringing Tulsa to Winston-Salem. What we're voting on is opening the door, giving a platform for them to come, and theoretically, any other company that wants to come and occupy this kind of level of occupancy. I am a little interested, at least, that your occupancy is suggested to be 250. Your projections are initially 135, and you hope to get to 200. Where did the 250 come from?
We hope to get to approximately 200 residents, but also want to plan for success in case it would make sense to bring that continuing care element onto the same campus. We don't technically count those as residents for their graduates of the program, but we do provide them affordable housing as well. So we wanted to incorporate that into the planning factors and not kind of paint ourselves into a corner as far as, well, we've got 200 residents, but where are we going to put all the graduates?
So the postgraduate program could include the 50 people. Is that the difference?
Correct.
Yeah. And how many employees and how much staff do you maintain?
Approximately 25 full-time employees.
On any given day on site would be approximately another 25 people. And within our zoning category that we have of general business, there's no restrictions. This is, I guess, asking planning department, somebody, about occupancy levels on GB and how many buildings. For example, we've talked about campus arrangements. This is based on site occupancy, not building occupancy.
Councilmember Larson, if I understand the question correctly, basically the only limitation on GB in terms of occupancy wouldn't relate to the people in the spaces, but it would basically be what you could park on the site, how many buildings you could have meeting your setbacks to adjoining property, height limits, things of that nature.
Right. So what we'll approve today is a welcome mat for you, and we'll look forward to seeing a site plan, which will go through the zoning process and a special use zoning. Is that right? Special use. Right. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing that.
Thank you. All right.
Good.
Ms. Adams, you had another comment? Well, look, I have a couple comments that I want to make. One, TROSA, when we look at TROSA, we look at this use, it is a type of need in our community that exists. No argument at all. Do have questions around the numbers, that it will be a large facility. I'm sure that there is probably an economic question there in terms of where the numbers lie, in terms of where a facility becomes profitable to ensure based upon beds, dollars that are received on beds, and how that is managed. And even in our conversations, what I understand is, and in the presentation, is that it will take time to scale up to a full facility. As we have with other facilities in the community that serve varying populations, is always becomes questions around how many facilities do we have in the city, how many facilities do we have within certain distances from one another, and I think those are questions that we need to make sure that are part of this conversation as we move forward, because I think on the back end in some of these instances we retroactively had to go back and try to figure out how to deal with several facilities within certain geographical closeness to each other. Other part of it is when we think about the population that we're looking to deal with in this community. Every day I engage and I see the challenges of the type of folks that TROSA seeks to work with, and hands down I think we need a facility like TROSA in this community servicing the population in this manner for the long-term care. And I've seen directly success stories from folks who've received services from TROSA. And I think that in the community, if we see this a type of facility like this come into the community, it'll be one I think that will positively impact. Now, some of the concerns I've raised and had conversations, one that likely, and even for the benefit of the broader community, there'll be a large number of individuals that won't be from this community that'll be served at the facility, but it still will have the ability to accommodate folks who are here from the Winston-Salem, Forsyth County community. a facility that large is going to accommodate folks who are coming into the city and the county from other areas. And I think that's something for us to understand and to know. On the other side of it, and I know this is only about opening the door for a facility, you will get my support on opening the door to this type of facility. When we come back around the question of where this facility is located, that's a whole nother conversation, and my disposition is different on the question of the type of property and the location of the property that's currently under consideration. And so I do separate that, and I'm fully supportive of how we can open the door to this facility coming into the community. We've got to work on whether or not the current property under consideration will be the best fit in the city of Winston-Salem. Ms. Adams, did you have another? Mr. Bessie?
I'll just move approval of a motion to recommend this to the council's consideration when it comes for a public hearing on October 1, and would note that what's being proposed is a new category which could be approved as a special use district rezoning. So it would have the full public vetting and comment opportunity.
I'll second.
Just two questions real quick, actually. Question for me, and I've been sitting here trying to think of the name of the facility. Actually, it just came to me when I thought about the street. Old Vineyard. What is the zoning for category for Old Vineyard? What is that zoning? Hospital.
It looks like.
Mr. Murphy stated that it's Zone GO, but the category of land use would be hospital.
Okay. All right. I just was wondering because there's some similarities in the actual work that they do in the facility. I will ask, and I know Councilman Bessie made a motion and Councilman Clark seconded a motion, but the question that I raised about distance of facilities is one that I think merits being a part of this conversation on the initial time frame of moving forward with this. And I would simply ask from a standpoint of if it's amenable by the committee, that we use the same distance requirement that we use for homeless shelters in the community in terms of distance, which I think, is it a mile? What is that, a mile, 2 miles? Quarter?
I think it's 250, 2,500 feet.
Mr. Chair, I just want to point out that we do have a use condition for this type of facility, same as group care A and B, as 1,000 feet from any other group care facility. So, or excuse me, 2,500. I apologize.
2,500. How far is that?
Half a mile.
Yeah.
Inflation.
Okay.
You can't talk about it later. You put it in UDO. It's there. There's a motion on the floor. I will abstain from voting on this tonight. I'm supportive of it. There's the only thing that's supposed to be about that distance requirement. It's something that I want to get a better handle on.
If I could, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I believe the spacing for homeless shelter is 1,250 feet. It's a quarter mile. The spacing for the group care facility A and B use is 2,500.
I was on the assumption it was a longer distance than that, from the distance of the facility. And the reason I ask that is that there's a consistent concern in certain parts of our community that certain type of facilities proliferate in one part of the community than the other. And so to ensure that we don't have an oversaturation in the future, although we see TROSA coming, we don't know who else may want to come, and we don't want to have that over-proliferation in certain parts, even though we know we have the public conversation, but if by right you can't even come and ask for it because of the distance, that eliminates some areas from consideration.
We can certainly have them report on this more Monday night.
Okay. All right. That's been moved forward to the full council, 2 in favor, 2 abstaining. And as you've heard, there's pretty good support for it. There's just that quagmire of a question that's out there. All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Item G4. Item G4.
Item G4, information on Winston-Salem Housing Authority's intent to receive purchase offers on the Crystal Towers apartment community located in the Northwest Ward.
Chairman Montgomery and members of the committee, in mid-August, we were notified of the Housing Authority's intent to seek offers for property at 625 West 6th Street. This is property known as Crystal Towers. This is an 11-story high-rise building that opened in 1970 that's home to approximately 200 residents. During the September council meeting, concern was expressed about this move and a desire to have more in-depth conversation with the Housing Authority. So we have with us this evening the CEO, Mr. Larry Woods, that's available to address council's concerns and talk more about this item with the committee. But ask Mr. Woods if he would
All right.
come forward.
Thank you, Ms. For this. Again, there was a high-level concern that came up when this notice came out in reference to this, and council members and others received a lot of calls and questions that we didn't necessarily have answers to, and so we wanted to request that Housing Authority come and have a little conversation about this so the community as a whole and council can have a better understanding of what's happening, what's going on. Mr. Woods, why don't you give your name and address for the record?
My name is Larry C. Woods, Chief Executive Officer for the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem. Address of our office is 500 West 4th Street, zip code is 27101. The Crystal Tower property is one of our properties that is a high-rise property, and it is fully HUD subsidized. But the subsidy on an annual basis since 2014 has been slowly been reduced. The subsidy per monthly rent from HUD in 2014 was $274. In 2017, we're down to $198. The property built in the 70s has a lot of mechanical issues, particularly elevators are not able to be serviced any longer. We have to actually have specialty companies come out and actually build control panels because the elevator systems are no longer built the way they were. So it's cost us a great deal of money. We also have a problem with the electrical switch gear within the basement of the building. Again, it's outdated and it's antiquated. We have plumbing and leaking issues, plumbing problems. We have addressed many of the risers going up, but the laterals going to the units are starting to leak as well also. Our tenant rents, they're not stable. They tend to fluctuate. The lowest rent is that we accept over there is $50 per month. The median rent is $215 per month. So our operating that building, we'll wind up using dollars that we are saving from other property to help subsidize this building. And our fear is that if we don't do something with this property when we can, is that we will wind up losing that property and maybe another property because we're constantly shifting resources over to maintain this property. We did have a discussion with the HUD Greensboro office and shared them with our concerns, and they were totally understood. It is our understanding of the regulations is that the tenants of that building cannot be displaced. And so we are by law obligated to make sure that every resident has options to move to another location if and when we find an offer that is acceptable. HUD has informed us based upon the regulation there's something called tenant protection vouchers, which says that that voucher would be of a level that the tenants would be paying no more rent right now that they'll be paying in the future. So if they're paying $50 now, when they find new accommodations, they'll continue to pay $50. That $50 right now includes utilities. If their new location does not include utilities, we would then cutting them a check to cover their utility costs so they will not be out of pocket. We would also be covering 100% of the relocation costs within a certain geographical area. That tenant protection voucher allows a tenant not just to find more suitable accommodations, it is also portable. They can take it to another community, they can take it to another state, where they can either find better accommodations, better employment. And so we feel that, and I've seen this personally, I've been in the building when one of the elevators are down, and it's heart-wrenching to see individuals 8 deep in line waiting for an elevator to come down in a wheelchair. And because the elevator is stopping on every floor, dropping people off and coming back down every floor, it's about 10, 15, sometimes 20-minute wait. When it does open up, only 4 wheelchairs can fit in and maybe 2 or 3 standing passengers, which means the rest on the line have to wait another 15, 20 minutes. To keep them in that condition, we think is unconscionable. So we met with them personally. I met with them personally, had a community meeting, and explained to them the situation. It was probably the most difficult discussion I've had with residents, to inform them that we were considering accepting proposal offers to purchase the building. We told them that the process is not a quick process. We still have to get HUD Washington, D.C.'s approval. It's going to take at least 9 to 12 months for them to approve it. Concurrent with that, we have to file a relocation plan once we accept the offer that's accepted by HUD and approved by our board. This will give the tenancy the ability to seek other suitable accommodations, again, here in Winston-Salem. We will be losing hard units, but we will not be servicing any less individuals. The additional vouchers that we receive for these units will be added to our current number of vouchers. So we're serving the same number of people. We just will not have the same hard number of units. Our goal is to take the sales price, and once we've covered the cost for relocation, is to find then other suitable properties that we can purchase that is closer to transportation, that is smaller, that be less densely populated in terms of concentration of poverty, and then go back and ask HUD to give us subsidies to support that property. And that has been vetted by our full board, and we've had several discussions over at least the last 7, 8, 9 months.
All right. Is there any other information items to present to the council at this time?
None
before we
at
have
this
questions? I know I have some questions, and I'll hold mine until the committee's had a chance to ask any. Mr. Bessie?
Hello, Mr. Woods. So do I correctly understand that the proposal is to move the 200 residents to privately owned rental housing?
The proposal is to give the residents some options for alternative housing. One of the options is that we would first offer them any available units that we have in the inventory at the time that's vacant. They would be given some priority. The second option is to give them a voucher and then provide them with the assistance in locating other suitable housing.
What kind of voucher, sir?
It'll be Section 8 vouchers.
Would you anticipate an increase in your allocation of Section 8 vouchers to the region?
Yes, what we would get is, again, once HUD agrees to the sale, we would get one voucher for every unit. They're called tenant protection vouchers to guarantee that they would not be displaced or become homeless.
And how long would that voucher be good for?
As long as they remain current and abide by the rules of the program.
If a particular tenant were to be temporarily ineligible, would you lose the voucher number?
No, well, I'm not sure. I doubt it. Most likely, no, we would not. My general counsel said no, we would not lose them.
Okay. You mentioned proximity to transportation. Isn't this on at least one, 7-day-a-week bus route?
It's an excellent location. We have no argument about the excellent location. Our problem is we do not have the operating dollars to operate the building at a level that we think the residents should live under, provide a certain quality of living.
Don't you have a number of folks who work in the downtown area because of where they are able to live here at Crystal Towers?
There are some folks in Crystal Towers that do work. I'm not sure if they work downtown, but they do work.
I know some who do.
Mm-hmm.
I believe from the news that you indicate that there's approximately $7 million in capital maintenance needs for the facility?
About $7 million. That was a number we received about 4 years ago from a third party called Nelrod. Nelrod is a national company that does a lot of work for HUD Washington, D.C. They were ones that actually wrote the legislation that requires housing authorities for every 5 years to have an independent needs assessment every 5 years. And then we are required then to try to each year to address as many of those needs based upon the annual basis. We have been unable to tackle the needs of Crystal Towers because other problems within Crystal Towers is keep eating up additional dollars. 1 year we spent over $700,000 in bed bugs treatment. Next year we had to spend over $200,000 in getting a special computer panel built in California shipped over here to have installed. We've had some generator problems. We've had leaking problems. It's just been a constant going on, and we're taking money from other properties just to keep this one going.
The other projects that we've been seeing, requests from the Housing Authority recently to endorse various grant requests. What have been the amounts of those requests? Can you recall?
In terms of the last one we requested, but the participation was our tax credit application. That was, the total value is about maybe $11-12 million. I think was asking the city for about $1 million, maybe $2 million in support of that project.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I've got at this point. Thank you, sir.
Councilman Adams,
Yeah, the compensation for utilities and all of that, that also stays in effect as long as the person has the voucher?
That's correct. If they rent a location where the rent includes utilities, then we would pay a higher a portion of that rent to the landlord. If it doesn't, then there is a calculation that HUD gives us that we are required to send a utility check for both water and gas and electricity to that tenant to cover the utilities. It would not cover telephone or cable. And it stays with that tenant, yes.
And this money comes from HUD as well?
That is correct.
What was the general feeling of the residents when you gave them the report, the news about the building?
They did have questions. Most of them were thankful that we came and talked to them face to face, and they didn't have to hear it through the grapevine or through the newspapers. They did appreciate and they did understand and agree that the elevators are a problem. Infestation of bed bugs and roaches is a problem there. They did admit about the leaking of water is a problem, and they were grateful for the fact that we were coming up with some solution that would give them some options rather than them having to continue to live in this condition. And they were very grateful for the fact that we told them that by law that we must make sure that they are housed. One of the questions that came up is that what happens if over time they are unable to find suitable location and the building has to be turned over. In our relocation plan, we would have received approval from HUD to temporary house them in one of our larger units on a temporary basis while they continue to look for suitable housing. So no one would ever be homeless or displaced.
I saw where, I guess in the news report or your report, it said something about you would take the money from the sale and reinvest the funds?
Yes, our goal is to take those dollars and to locate other properties, as said, hopefully in areas where there's good transportation, close to downtown as close as possible, and to purchase hopefully an existing unit that we can buy, rehab, and then put the subsidy back on those units also.
How is Sunrise any different from Crystal?
It's not that much different, but we have less mechanical problems over there. And Sunrise, because our old office building is there, that office building does generate revenue, which helps support the Sunrise Towers property. Each property now has to be self-sustaining per HUD. We have to report to HUD individually by property.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Clark.
Ms. Adams just asked my first question. There is a sister building on MLK, Sunrise.
Sunrise Towers, yes, there is.
All right, and I say it's a sister. It's pretty darn close, maybe identical twin.
It's actually a twin.
Twin.
Yellow panels and
blue
panels.
Anyway, just a general comment here. Mr. Montgomery is, and as well as Ms. Adams and others, are very strong advocates of affordable housing. But I think this is emblematic of the challenge we have, and it is this. If the subsidy does not properly cover the true cost between what a unit should rent for and what the person can pay, you end up with a situation like this, and that is deferred maintenance that bills and bills and bills. We have the same challenge over, I think is it Plaza Apartments over on Thurman, is that the name?
That's correct.
Yep. Correct. Where, again, you have low rents for the tenants, so it's very affordable, but if the subsidy's not enough, those units, 18 years after the city gave $2.5 million or whatever it was, none of that's been paid back and whatever. So I think we need to keep this in front of us, that if we are truly interested in long-term affordable housing, we have to be sure we have income, whether it's HUD or whatever, to properly maintain the facilities. And part of the cost of a property is you can call it replenishing, depreciation, or whatever, but it's the fact, and everybody in here, I think, lives in a house. You got to put a new roof on every so often. The refrigerator goes every 10 years, and the washing machine every 12, or whatever the numbers are. You have to be sure those are captured. And one thing I've seen again and again in this community is where we have properties that we fix up, and 20 years later they're disintegrated again because we have not truly recognized the real cost and funded them accordingly. So, and I will say good luck on selling. I don't think this is a gentrification project. I think you're going to have a hard time selling it. It's a building with a lot of problems, but I wish you good luck so that you can get the money and reinvest it.
And that's why we worded our solicitation that we're just taking proposals, offers. We know that it's going to take a while for us to find the right one, and we're not obligated to accept any at any particular time. We have a right to reject them and go back out for more solicitations, more offers.
Let me ask one last question. Are you currently actively working with the tenants to relocate them, or are you going to wait till you get all your approvals?
We want to wait for the approvals.
Okay.
Because if we relocate now, then we'd really be in trouble.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Woods, thanks for coming to speak to us. I want to start by saying that, you and I worked together with Stony Glen, and I thought that was just one of the things that we got right. So I'm confident in your ability to relocate and to bring residents back if that were the case. I just want to start with a good note. Secondly, I know there are a significant amount of repairs that need to be done to the building. I know that there are issues surrounding the quality of life, bugs, and elevator, things of that nature. But I think in this case, the implications are far-reaching. I think the implications of selling Crystal Towers will haunt us for years to come. This body has nothing to do with the sale or the purchase of it, but I just want to express my concerns about it. I think that at some point in time, 52 came through and divided the community. Whether it was done on purpose or whether it was not done on purpose, it was done. And the implications still haunt us to today. Crystal Towers is a facility where low income, poor, disabled, seniors all have an ability to live downtown. This is probably the only facility and probably the only opportunity that they will ever have to live downtown. Downtown is the living room of the city of Winston-Salem. And if these people can't live downtown, what message do we send the people of our community? Now, I know it just comes down to dollars and cents, but if you look at the 50,000 or the 10,000 foot view, this is a problem, and in my opinion, this will be seen as gentrification in its form. I said yesterday that the stage was set for gentrification. In my community, I hadn't seen a whole heck of a lot of it in the last 10 or 15 years, but I think this is the example of it. So I don't think it's being done intentionally, but the fact that it's being done is extremely problematic. My direct question to you is there the potential? Was this the first time I heard about it? Is when I saw the press release. Is there the potential for a public-private or a public-private partnership with the city of Winston-Salem to keep Crystal Towers alive and keep those residents there to be able to enjoy downtown like so many other people are able to do based on their socioeconomic status?
I have not found any other housing authority in America that has entered into such a relationship with a city agency or city government. I know that HUD, under their asset management in their 2011 regulations, state that if a property cannot be self-sustaining, which means that it cannot either break even or show a profit, the housing authority has 1 year to come up with an action plan. If it's still after 1 year it can't break even, then it must put it on the rolls for sale and make arrangements for the residents to be relocated and to take those funds and to buy other property. And that's the law we're under right now. I totally agree. This is something that the staff and the board has wrestled with. You made the comment that this is a location for low-income families. The first discussion we ever had, we said this is probably the only one downtown.
Yeah.
And it will look bad that the only one downtown is now gone. But we had to wrestle with the humanity of the tenants there. Is it fair for someone that's in a wheelchair that is wheelchair bound and when we talked to the tenants, one tenant came up to Kevin and said, 2 weeks ago, I was stuck in the elevator twice in 1 month. Another one said I was stuck 3 times in 1 month. The reality is the building is as Councilman Steve Clark talked about, deferred maintenance. The money just isn't there. I've looked at other properties that this council has voted on. I mean, I've looked at 1-bedroom rents in the Links in Plant 64, the Nissan building. I mean, they're collecting $1,000, $1,300 a month. We're collecting less than $400 a month. We go to the same big box stores to buy doors, to buy paint. We go to the same hardware stores to get locks. We don't get a discount from Duke Power for electricity. We don't get a discount from the water company. We have the same kilowatt rates as anyone else, but we don't have the revenue. I think Councilman Clark hit it on the head. The money just isn't there for it to be self-sustaining. That is the issue. And the issue is, do we continue to allow residents to live in that condition and let it continue to deteriorate, or do we try to strike when the iron is hot, to try to get the best opportunity to give them the option of either moving to another one of our facilities or give them the option to take a voucher and to move into a better location, whether it's in this community or another community or another state. So we wrestled with this over 6, 7, 8, 9 months. It wasn't a knee-jerk decision. It was difficult.
Yeah, I certainly don't think, if I may.
Mr. Taylor, I do want to make sure we get around, and I will.
Yes, sir.
So brevity.
Brevity.
We got to be brief.
No, Mr. Taylor, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. So I think about our airport. I think about the train system. Nobody retroactively can look back and say those were the right decisions. It affected our city for years to come. I think for the next 100 to 200 years of this city, if we make this decision, we've made it forever. So you mentioned an action plan. All right? I'm sure you've evaluated the concept of an action plan. Can we go back and revisit the idea of an action plan and try to put one together? I'm just not ready to abandon ship and say, we can't make the repairs, we don't have the resources, we don't have the subsidies, it's over. Give us the opportunity to try to work through it, because this is something that's important that will shape the future of this city for my children and my children's children. They'll never have an opportunity to live downtown. It will, all of our children, if we don't make a decision now.
The biggest concern is we need an influx of money. The building cannot support a mortgage, can't support debt. As you can see, the revenue stream is not there. At the same time, we need additional subsidy support from somewhere. HUD is not providing it. And that would mean a commitment from this city for a subsidy that would be permanent, and that would be escalating as building material prices go up, as wages go up, taxes go up. It means city council, this city would have to make an additional commitment on a subsidy on a federal property forever. I cannot ask the city to do that. I mean, I think it'd be irresponsible of me when I think I can give the residents there an option to move to another location, take those dollars and buy additional property, and then try to put additional units in our inventory. We're not, again, servicing any less number of families, because we're going to get one-for-one replacement of vouchers. So we're not losing, not housing any less families. They'll just live in different locations. I deeply regret that they're not living downtown. But this is a problem that cities across the nation are facing. As city downtown become more popular, rents are going up.
Final statement.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear the chips are on the table. We have an opportunity to go back and revisit this action plan and see if we can be of assistance, or find some partners who could be of assistance. That door hadn't been shut yet, so that does make me hopeful.
Mr. McIntosh.
No. Had to be said.
What was the original purpose of this building?
Residential.
Was it?
Initially it was a senior building.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't built as market.
No, it was always a subsidized building, and it was back in the mid 80s when the movement across the country to shut down the large mental institutions, the HUD asked housing authorities to accept to make the building senior and disabled. But being disabled did not necessarily mean a physical disability, meaning being sight or hearing or speech. It could be a substance abuse problem also. So the building has a wide range of individuals in the building.
And I know we've covered this, but this is not a facility that you would build again. And it was built in an era when construction quality was just not that good, 1970s. And this is a failing building. But it also is a textbook case of gentrification. I get pretty pedantic about the definition of what is gentrification. This is gentrification. So that the tough choice is, what's the greater evil? And the sacrifice of your mission of serving as many people as possible with the budget you have, or a very public black eye of causing gentrification. That's a tough decision. I'm glad we're not making that call, because neither one of those is a palatable call.
Mhm.
They both have consequences. So, is it possible? I guess you have not seen any responses yet from your, and you probably couldn't talk about them even if you did. But I guess it would be possible to see a winning bid that included some component of low-income housing as part of the condition of purchase.
That's why we made it quite clear that this is not about.
It's not strictly bottom dollar.
Correct. We're looking at what's the best use for the property, as well as the dollar value that would help us continue our mission.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson, any comment? Brevity.
The parcel that's being sold, the actual land that's being sold, I mean, right now we're talking about a building that is getting branded as unsalvageable in so many ways. I assume it's single-bedroom units, right?
That's correct.
And you got 200 of them? Are you full
203.
capacity? 203, so you got 3 vacant ones right now.
No, we're actually pretty occupied.
You're fully occupied
yes,
at this point. But the land that it sits on, is it all within the street curbing, or does it jump across the street and take it in?
No, it's all on the same block, and it has its own individual parking lot.
And how much acreage is that? Do you have any idea? I mean, the reason I'm asking is
Probably a little more than 3 acres.
it's not possible to accommodate another building. What's going to happen here is we're going to get a community that's going to be spread out, not downtown, is going to lose accessibility to some of the amenities that we've developed over the last 10 years, and downtown, and they're going to be scattered within the community in housing that is being supported, that you locate, hopefully. One of my concerns is if we just use this building up, and are we moving the population to another building just to use up? If we can't support, from a maintenance perspective, buildings that we occupy, what makes us think that in 5 or 10 years the buildings that we move these people to are going to be unsustainable as well? And I think what we have is a very difficult problem here that is financial. In a lot of ways that we are not able to sustain the kind of housing that we expect to provide. And we use up the buildings, we can't maintain them. And then we have to move out of them and we tear them down or whatever. I would agree with Councilmember Taylor. I would hope that this iconic location and building, which is a signature in the community architecturally, it may be controversial, that we not abandon it quickly, and that we look at the possibilities of finding other partners who perhaps can support it. If we are to do the rebooting of this building to make it occupiable to the level that we expect, we're going to have to vacate parts of it, either floors at a time or whole sections of it, to reboot it. But I think long term the question is this a valid location for the kind of housing and population that we want to see in our downtown? And I think it is. So before we abandon the place, what would it take as an option to try to rehabilitate it, either in phases or as a complete work, and what would it take? I know you've thought about this, but I would agree that I am reluctant just to take this population, scatter them out through the city, take the money, buy another building, put some people in there, and then let that go to hell too.
Well, just a quick point. I do want you to respond to those questions. And do we have staff taking some notes on these kind of questions we're asking out here? I do want to know, because I think that some of these will require some more information coming back to the council to answer some of these in detail. I don't hear this as the end of this conversation at all. But I'm going to ask you, Mr. Woods, if you can briefly respond to that question, those questions there.
Councilman, the subsidy for each of our types of properties vary. The lowest subsidy is high-rise buildings. All of our high-rise buildings get the same $198 versus our guard departments. We get over $300. Cleveland gets close to $425 per apartment. we would not buy another high-rise building knowing full well the subsidy wouldn't support it. That's why when we built Oaks at 10th and we built Camden Station, they're garden apartments because they get a higher subsidy. If we bought something, we would not buy a mid-rise or high-rise building knowing full well once we modernized it, we would not get enough operating costs to sustain it. We would try to buy something that would give us the greatest amount of subsidy that would then be self-sustaining over a period of time.
Okay. The 189 is determined by HUD.
But yes, it's an allocation. and again, and my number says here is that it was in 2014 it was $274. 2015 it dropped down to $187. 2016 it dropped back up to $217, and then 2017 it was $198. So it's not a consistent amount of subsidy that we can be guaranteed every year. And if a tenant that is paying $215 a month moves out, and another tenant who is making less money, his rent is not $215. It could be $50 a month. So we don't have a stable income stream that we can actually really budget on. It makes it very difficult.
Right. And so, a couple questions to you, Mr. Woods. I have, as my years turn into days left on this council, I get a little nostalgic in the fact that I'm proud of the fact that sitting here around this, I pushed very, very hard for this council to look towards how we deal with affordability and quality of housing in the city. And I agree wholeheartedly with comments made by Councilmember Taylor and Larson tonight in the sense that this today sets a very, very challenging situation for us as a community. Looking at the revenue and the conversation that you have now, I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of revenue for the building and facility as a whole, but we need to look at the broader picture of what this does. 203 units to come offline at this location actually has an impact of 406 in the community as a whole. We take away 203 other individuals receive vouchers that go to other affordable housing units in the community, taking those units off the market for other affordability in the community, which again decreases affordability in the community as a whole, and we have no plan to reproduce another 203 units in the community. That, at the core for me, is the problem that we face in this. That yes, we know that over time, after 30 years, 40 years of a property, we're going to have to make reinvestments in it. We're going to have to make sure that property has an extended life period long term. But as we approach, and we've just commissioned and spent money to look at how we deal with affordable housing in this community, this then becomes a place in which we have to put ourselves in a position where we really begin to deal with those concerns as a community. And that property, even if we take the folks who live in there and we give them that voucher, the fact of that property and its location and proximity to amenities in downtown and not having that affordability in that area is a challenge. We cannot recreate 203 units for $7 million based upon what the challenges that exist in that building. This says to me, even if we moved individuals out of that property, if it costs $7 million to renovate and deal with the needs, we have restored those 203 units at a cost that we could not recreate on the market today. You could not build 203 units of housing for $7 million in the city of Winston-Salem and have them at an affordable rate. It just won't happen. And so to me, it then says, if we have the infrastructure needs in the facility, going back to the question, how do we preserve that housing in a way that ensures that we don't have a net loss of 203 units and then take away another 203 units in the community that are already a hot commodity for individuals who are looking for affordability. Walk every day with individuals who are trying to use vouchers to get placed in housing, and it is a hard job to find landowners and others in the community to be able to accept that. We see one today in the community. Thank you for your hard work of accepting some of those in the properties, but there are others who they don't accept them, and it's a challenge to allow for that voucher to get used in a place. And so when we take those off the market, we're putting other individuals who may get first preference at a housing authority property to get housed. There are other people in the community who are now 203 potentially who would be challenged to find housing in the community, which again exacerbates the issues that we have. And again, you know, it's a hard position to be in because you have the quality question that we don't want to be in the newspaper about the fact that we have people living in poor quality housing, and then we have the issue of making sure that we're able to maintain and reproduce those units. And I'm one that says, I think we can deal with both. I think there's a way. I'm one who believes that the cup is not half empty but half full, and we can find a way to do it if we really want to do it. And today we can find the fact that you can get $1,300 in downtown, but that's not a property that we should even be positioning, that it needs to have $1,300 a month in rent, because that's not the market or the demographic that we're looking to house there. And I think we need to go back to the drawing board, figure out how to do it. I've heard folks around this table who say they're willing to talk about how to find that and how to figure it out. I'm willing to do it. I don't know who else is willing to do that, but I know that the loss that we'll have is bigger than just those 203 units that we have there. It is going to send a larger ripple in this community that's going to have negative impacts with agencies and organizations who are trying to make sure people have housing every day. And I know you all didn't make the decision lightly, but that's the rippling impact. Councilmember Bessie and Adams had some additional comments, and I know we're about at our time.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it too long, but I do have a couple of comments. It sounds as though some artificial standards in the federal regulations are driving a decision which socially is unacceptable. This would contribute to a trend of pricing folks out of the central city, where the transportation is and where the jobs are. It's clearly a tough situation for the housing authority to be in. If this were a city decision, a city of Winston-Salem government decision, I would say this is an unacceptable outcome, and we have to figure out a way to avoid it. The solutions ultimately will require some cooperation from other levels of government to change some standards and in all likelihood to add some resources. In the short term, we as a council cannot control this decision, but I think that we can encourage the housing authority to work with us to look for solutions that don't end up with hundreds fewer affordable housing opportunities in the central city. Let's find some imaginative approaches that will avoid that result, please.
Councilman Montgomery, as you can see, your work over the past decade is bringing conversations and fruit to this council and the city about, you can't just talk about it. We got to have a plan as to how we address affordable housing. We flying by the seat of our pants now when people bring us stuff about affordable housing because we don't have a strategy in place to deal with it. Yes, we had the study done, but you have to go further than that and have a plan. I was on the Housing Authority Board for 9 years, the commission, 7 years. I was the chair. I remember when we had, Trend West, Sunrise, and Crystal Towers, the one out of Trend West. Where's that one? There was one out there on Stratford Road.
Healy Towers.
Healy Towers. Mm-hmm. I remember when the panels became a safety issue, not just in Winston, all over the country, this design that the Housing Authority had used. I remember when the elevators became a problem in these buildings, the design. Again, as Councilmember McIntosh knows the deal in building, construction changes, safety changes. My concern is the quality of life of the people there, safety first. If the elevator's not working and they're not working appropriately, and we haven't fixed them, they haven't fixed them, we're talking about a safety issue now. So either the city is going to do the partnerships, get with some other folks in the city, Continuum of Care, all these other agencies. It's all hands on deck. Because we can just talk about it, but now we're talking about the safety of the people that live in the tower. That's my concern. that even if we have to make a move to renovate half of it, like we're doing the police station, we got to figure out, we got to get, along with them, an audit, another clearer audit of what trouble and what issues we got here, and the ones we need to work on immediately to prevent harm to the folks that live there. Our passion is good for affordable housing, but right now we got people that might not be in a too safe situation.
I know there's, again, a lot of thoughts in what we have today. And Mr. Woods, we didn't actually here to try to beat you up.
But we did.
He knows
we
that.
did.
He knows that.
But we did.
But really to express the concern that we express from constituents and folks we represent that have this high level of anxiety and high level of concern. I'm asking that maybe we can have an opportunity here shortly to sit down and talk through some opportunities. There are council members, others who want to be a part of that, and maybe staff even to strategize some opportunities. I think it's one to raise these concerns. It's another thing to try to figure out what's a practical way to deal with the two challenges we face: poor quality of housing and the net loss of units in the community, and trying to figure out how do we address the fact of dealing with both of those issues. And so hopefully we can get on your schedule to.
Well, we'll make that happen. I have no problem sitting down and talking, but I will say that Mr. Montgomery and Councilman Adams, your two, hopefully are moving on to bigger positions. And this is to Councilman Adams. In 2007, HUD published something called the Harvard Operating Cost Study. That cost study was to determine what does it take to operate a well-run housing authority. And Harvard came back and told HUD it was impossible after 3 years for them to determine what it really cost, because the mission of HUD moved away from real estate and moved more towards self-sufficiency. And as a result, there was over $30 billion of unmet capital needs and deferred maintenance. And this is where we are now. They've now gone back to trying to vet the preservation of housing stock, but the subsidies are going down. I mean, that is the reality. People got into office and they felt self-sufficiency was the thing. Housing authority, when I first arrived here, the question I was constantly asked: when are you going to fund the Twin City Little League? When are you going to fund this? I said, housing authority is no longer in the recreation business. We got to take our money and try to preserve our housing stock. My fear is that I would have been here 4 years earlier. I'm surprised we able to extend it this long. But the newer properties that we're building, the Oaks at 10th, Camden Station, Stony Glen, Fairview, Townview, beautiful. No problems. Each of those at least 50 units, I got at least 200 families waiting to move in. Crystal, Sunrise, Healy, here there are problems. I've got to run a security camera system, closed circuit camera system, attached to the police department so I can make sure that folks are safe. I mean, these are other expenses that other folks downtown aren't tagged with. I mean, it's impossible to run 203 units a month, collecting $198 and then $215 from the median of the tenants. It's impossible.
Mr. Woods?
Yes, but I'm willing to sit down and talk.
Right, that's it. Mr. Woods, I again appreciate those comments. On my door in my office, everyone who comes into my office has to see it when they walk in, and it says this: it says, "Give me at least one reason why we can do it." Mm-hmm. And that's how I approach most things. Give me at least one reason why we can, and this is one that I think we got to figure out. I think there's more than one reason and one way we can. With all of that in mind, all those problems, I think there's at least one way that we can figure out how to do it. And so staff and others that we can figure out how to be in conversation to figure this out. That's why that, and I'm going to get back on my horse, that's why that $500,000 on sale of property would be helpful in such a situation as this. Mr. Garrity mentioned that this is the second time we have to hold it. So if we move that item up to the top of the list, the fence conversation, we moved it twice so we can
move it beginning of
the agenda so we don't find ourselves in this, even starting an hour early.
Before consent.
Right,
do it at the very beginning.
That we can make sure we address those issues.
One direct question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Woods, you have people in our community who are sometimes not on purpose, sometimes purposely going around, especially candidates and their employees are going around saying that it is the city council that is looking to sell Crystal Towers, and the decision rests with us, and we're doing this. You just state clearly for the record, whose authority is it to possess or sell Crystal Towers, and who makes the decision?
That decision rests solely with the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority based upon the recommendation of the executive staff with the approval of Washington, D.C. It's a very long process. It's not an easy process, but the city has no accountability, no liability, no fault if we have to sell this property. I duly appreciate any assistance or the discussions. If there can be some solution, I think the Board of Commissioners will gladly hear some options. But again, we have the solicitation on the street is just for offers. We haven't said we're going to accept any, but our goal is to hopefully find a developer that's willing to build and put affordable housing back into that location. How many units? I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Bessie?
May I see a show of hands, please? Who is here for the Public Works meeting? Okay. Let me suggest then, please indulge us. Give us about a 7-minute break, and we will begin at 6:10.
Bring some more
At
chairs
6:10.
We'll adjourn. Thank you.